Not all aliens come from outer space. Some sit across the table, smile at your success, and secretly hope you fail. They speak your language, live in your world, and yet think in ways that leave you confused, drained, and doubting yourself. This book is not about changing them. It is about understanding them, protecting yourself, and learning how to stay powerful in a world full of emotional outsiders. Chapter 1: Who are the aliens among us? Aliens are not always strange creatures from distant planets. In real life, aliens are the people who make you feel uncomfortable, confused, small, or emotionally drained without an obvious reason. They look normal. They talk normally. They may even appear intelligent, kind, or supportive at first. Yet something about them feels off. After interacting with them, you feel tired, anxious, or doubtful about yourself. These are the aliens among us, and before you can deal with them, you must first learn how to recognize them. Most people struggle in life not because they lack talent or intelligence, but because they constantly deal with individuals who quietly drain their emotional energy. These individuals do not attack openly. They do not always insult or threaten. Instead, they operate subtly, using behavior patterns that slowly wear you down over time. The danger of aliens lies in their invisibility. Because they do not look harmful, people ignore their impact until real damage is done. Aliens can be coworkers who undermine you while smiling at your face, friends who compete with you in silence, family members who dismiss your feelings, or partners who make everything about themselves. They thrive in emotional confusion. When you cannot clearly explain what feels wrong, they gain power over you. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that bad behavior must be loud or aggressive. In reality, the most harmful people are often calm, calculated, and socially acceptable. Aliens rarely shout. They sigh. They raise an eyebrow. They ask questions that feel innocent but leave you second-guessing yourself. They plant seeds of doubt instead of throwing insults. Over time, those seeds grow into insecurity, guilt, and emotional exhaustion. Another defining trait of aliens is their lack of emotional responsibility. They never feel accountable for how you feel. If you express discomfort, they shift the blame back to you. You are too sensitive. You misunderstood. You are overreacting. This tactic slowly trains you to silence yourself. You begin to question your instincts, even though your instincts are trying to protect you. Aliens are experts at avoiding direct responsibility while still controlling the emotional atmosphere around them. They may present themselves as victims, mentors, helpers, or truth-tellers, but the outcome is always the same. You feel smaller and they feel more powerful. Understanding aliens requires you to stop focusing on their words and start observing their effects. How do you feel after spending time with someone? Energized or drained? Clear or confused? Confident or doubtful? Your emotional state after interaction is the most accurate indicator of alien behavior. Healthy people leave you feeling respected even after disagreement. Aliens leave you feeling unsettled even after friendly conversations. They often thrive on ambiguity. Nothing is ever fully clear. Plans change suddenly. Promises are vague. Compliments come with hidden comparisons. This constant uncertainty keeps you emotionally off balance, making you easier to influence. Another important characteristic of aliens is their need for control. This control is rarely obvious. It shows up as unsolicited advice, constant correction, subtle criticism, or emotional withdrawal when you do not behave as expected. They want to shape your choices, reactions, and self-image without openly admitting it. When you resist, they act confused or hurt, making you feel guilty for asserting independence. Over time, you may start adjusting your behavior just to keep the peace. This is how aliens slowly occupy your mental space. They do not invade loudly, they settle quietly. Many aliens are not intentionally cruel. This is a difficult truth to accept. Some are simply emotionally immature, insecure, or afraid of losing relevance. However, intent does not erase impact. Whether they mean harm or not, the effect on your mental health is real. Understanding this helps you let go of the need to diagnose or fix them. The goal is not to label people as good or bad, but to recognize patterns that harm your well-being. Aliens often struggle with empathy. They may understand emotions intellectually but fail to respond emotionally. Your pain becomes a topic, not a concern. Your success becomes a threat, not a celebration. This lack of emotional reciprocity creates an imbalance where you give more understanding than you receive. Over time, this imbalance leads to resentment, burnout, and emotional fatigue. Another subtle sign of alien behavior is how they handle boundaries. When you set a boundary, a healthy person adjusts. An alien reacts. They may mock your boundary, test it repeatedly, or punish you emotionally for enforcing it. This reaction reveals their true motive. Boundaries threaten aliens because boundaries limit access, and access is how they maintain influence. Recognizing aliens among us is not about becoming suspicious of everyone. It is about becoming honest with yourself. If a relationship consistently costs you peace, clarity, or self-respect, it deserves reevaluation. Many people stay stuck because they confuse familiarity with safety. Just because someone has been in your life for a long time does not mean they belong there. Aliens rely on your tolerance, not your weakness. They remain powerful only as long as you ignore your inner signals. Awareness is the first act of self-respect. Once you see alien behavior clearly, you stop personalizing it. You realize that their actions reflect their internal state, not your worth. This shift in perspective is the foundation of emotional strength. You are no longer reacting blindly. You are observing consciously. This chapter is not meant to make you angry or defensive. It is meant to make you aware. Awareness is calm. Awareness is quiet. Awareness gives you choice. As you move forward, remember this: aliens lose their power the moment you stop trying to understand them emotionally and start understanding them behaviorally. You do not need to fight them. You need to see them. And once you see them, you are no longer vulnerable. Chapter 2. Why aliens target you. Aliens do not choose their targets randomly. They are drawn to certain qualities, behaviors, and emotional patterns. Understanding why they focus on you is essential, because once you see the reason, the shame disappears. Many people secretly believe they attract difficult people because something is wrong with them. In reality, aliens are often attracted to strength, empathy, consistency, and emotional depth. They seek what they lack. You are not targeted because you are weak. You are targeted because you offer something valuable. Aliens look for people who listen, who give chances, who try to understand, and who carry responsibility seriously. These traits create trust, and trust gives access. Access is everything to an alien. It allows them to influence, control, and feed off emotional energy without resistance. If you are reliable, kind, or self-aware, you naturally lower your guard around others. Aliens sense this openness immediately. They feel safe enough to project their insecurities onto you. This is not admiration, it is opportunism. Another major reason aliens target you is your tolerance. You are willing to explain yourself. You are willing to forgive. You are willing to see potential instead of patterns. Aliens depend on this mindset. They test small behaviors first: subtle disrespect, emotional withdrawal, passive remarks. When there are no consequences, they escalate. Your silence becomes permission. Your patience becomes a resource they consume. Over time, you may notice that aliens behave better around people who challenge them and worse around people who understand them. This is not coincidence. Aliens respect resistance, not compassion. They do not respond to kindness the way healthy people do. Instead, they interpret it as flexibility. Flexibility means they can push further. Aliens are also deeply threatened by emotional independence. If you have goals, confidence, or a strong sense of self, they may feel invisible or irrelevant around you. This insecurity fuels their behavior. Rather than improve themselves, they attempt to shrink you. They criticize your choices, question your decisions, or subtly undermine your confidence. Their goal is not to destroy you completely, but to lower you just enough so they feel comfortable again. In their mind, balance is achieved when you doubt yourself. This is why aliens often appear supportive at first. They offer advice, guidance, or validation. This creates a dynamic where you unconsciously position them as emotionally important. Once that position is secured, control follows. Another reason aliens target you is your emotional availability. You are present, you respond, you engage, you care. While these are beautiful qualities, they also make you accessible. Aliens seek emotional access because it allows them to unload their frustrations, redirect blame, and avoid accountability. They may overshare, complain constantly, or create crises that require your attention. Over time, your emotional bandwidth becomes occupied by their problems. You start carrying weight that is not yours. Meanwhile, your needs remain unaddressed. This imbalance benefits them. Aliens also target people who value harmony. If you dislike conflict, you may avoid confrontation to keep peace. Aliens exploit this preference. They know you would rather adjust than argue. They use emotional tension as leverage, creating discomfort until you comply. This does not always happen consciously. Many aliens operate on instinct, driven by unresolved fears and unmet emotional needs. Still, the outcome remains the same. You bend, they benefit. Another powerful reason aliens target you is your self-awareness. You reflect, you question yourself, you look inward. While this leads to growth, it also creates vulnerability. Aliens rarely self-reflect. When conflict arises, they instinctively shift focus outward. They subtly redirect responsibility toward you, knowing you are likely to examine your own role. This creates a dynamic where you carry the emotional labor of the relationship. You apologize more, you adjust more, you doubt more. Aliens remain unchanged. The relationship becomes emotionally asymmetrical. One person grows tired, the other remains comfortable. It is also important to understand that aliens are not attracted to confidence that is loud. They are attracted to confidence that is quiet. Loud confidence challenges them publicly. Quiet confidence threatens them silently. If you do not seek validation but still perform well, if you are calm under pressure, if you do not compete openly, aliens may feel unsettled. They cannot read you easily. This uncertainty pushes them to test you, provoke reactions, or gain control. Your calm becomes a mirror that reflects their chaos. Rather than face it, they attempt to disturb it. Aliens also target people during transitions. When you are evolving, changing direction, or stepping into a new phase, your boundaries may temporarily soften. You may seek connection, guidance, or reassurance. Aliens sense this moment of openness. They insert themselves during vulnerability, offering familiarity or support. Once you stabilize, their presence feels heavier. This is why some relationships feel supportive at first and suffocating later. Timing plays a role in alien attachment. Understanding why aliens target you does not mean blaming yourself. It means reclaiming clarity. You begin to see patterns instead of stories. You realize that your empathy does not require self-sacrifice. Your patience does not require tolerance of disrespect. Your strength does not require explanation. When you stop asking why you attract aliens and start asking why you allow access, power shifts back to you. Aliens lose influence when awareness replaces confusion. This chapter is not about hardening your heart. It is about protecting it. You do not need to change who you are to avoid aliens. You need to change who gets access to you. The moment you understand this, you stop internalizing their behavior. You see it for what it is, a response to your light, not a reflection of your flaws. Chapter 3. The silent energy drain. Not all harm is loud. Some damage happens quietly over time without arguments, insults, or dramatic confrontations. This is the silent energy drain, and it is one of the most dangerous effects aliens have on your life. You may not notice it immediately because nothing obvious seems wrong. Conversations appear normal. Interactions feel polite. Yet slowly, your motivation drops, your clarity fades, and your emotional strength weakens. You start feeling tired in ways that rest does not fix. This exhaustion is not physical. It is emotional depletion caused by constant, subtle pressure. Aliens drain energy without raising alarms. They do it through tone, timing, and presence. You may notice that after being around certain people, your mind feels heavy. Your thoughts become slower. Your confidence feels distant. This is not coincidence. Emotional energy is real, and aliens know how to consume it without appearing aggressive. They do not need conflict. They thrive on influence. One of the primary ways aliens drain energy is through constant negativity disguised as realism. They frame pessimism as honesty. They highlight risks instead of possibilities. They question ideas instead of supporting effort. Over time, their words create an emotional environment where enthusiasm feels unsafe. You hesitate to share plans. You downplay dreams. You stop expressing excitement. This self-censorship slowly disconnects you from your inner drive. Aliens rarely say you cannot do this. Instead, they ask, "Are you sure this will work?" The question sounds reasonable, but the effect is doubt. Repeated doubt weakens momentum. Another method of silent draining is emotional inconsistency. Aliens give attention unpredictably. One day they are warm, supportive, and engaging. The next day they are distant, cold, or distracted. This inconsistency keeps you emotionally alert. You begin monitoring their mood, adjusting your behavior to regain connection. This constant emotional scanning consumes energy. Your focus shifts away from your own needs and toward managing the relationship. You may not realize it, but your nervous system is under continuous stress. Stability disappears, and emotional safety becomes conditional. Over time, this leads to anxiety, self-blame, and emotional fatigue. Aliens also drain energy by making everything complicated. Simple decisions become discussions, clear boundaries become debates, straight answers turn into long explanations. You spend excessive mental energy trying to communicate clearly only to feel misunderstood. This confusion is not accidental. Complexity gives aliens leverage. When things are unclear, they control interpretation. You start explaining yourself repeatedly, hoping to be understood. Each explanation costs emotional energy. Eventually, you feel tired of talking, tired of clarifying, tired of trying. Silence becomes easier than self-expression, and that silence benefits them. Another silent drain comes from emotional dumping. Aliens often share their problems excessively without seeking solutions. They complain but do not change. They vent but do not grow. You listen, empathize, and offer support, expecting balance. Balance rarely comes. Over time, you become an emotional container for their unresolved issues. Your empathy becomes a service they consume freely. Meanwhile, when you need support, they minimize, redirect, or disappear. This one-sided exchange slowly empties you. You may feel guilty for wanting distance, but the exhaustion remains. Energy imbalance always leads to emotional burnout. Aliens are also skilled at creating subtle guilt. They remind you of favors. They hint at sacrifices. They frame your boundaries as rejection. This guilt keeps you emotionally tied even when you are drained. You stay because leaving feels wrong, not because staying feels right. Guilt is a powerful energy extractor. It forces you to override intuition and ignore discomfort. Over time, this creates internal conflict. Part of you wants freedom. Another part feels responsible. This inner tension is exhausting. Aliens rarely demand openly. They imply. Implication keeps you engaged without clarity. Another quiet drain is the absence of validation. Aliens rarely acknowledge effort genuinely. They may notice mistakes quickly but overlook growth. This lack of recognition slowly erodes self-worth. You work harder, hoping for appreciation that never fully arrives. The goalposts move, standards shift, nothing feels enough. This creates a cycle of striving without satisfaction. Emotional energy is lost when effort does not meet acknowledgement. Humans need recognition to recharge. Aliens deprive you of it strategically or unconsciously. The silent energy drain is dangerous because it normalizes exhaustion. You begin to believe that feeling tired, unmotivated, or emotionally heavy is just part of life. You stop questioning it. You push through instead of stepping back. This allows the drain to continue unchecked. Awareness is the first interruption. When you notice how certain interactions affect your energy, you regain control. You begin to separate what is yours from what is being taken. Energy does not lie. Your body and mind respond honestly, even when words are polite. This chapter is about listening to that response. You do not need dramatic proof to justify distance. You do not need permission to protect your peace. If a relationship consistently leaves you depleted, it is costing you something valuable. Energy is life currency. Where it flows, life grows. Where it leaks, life weakens. Aliens survive on unnoticed leaks. The moment you recognize the drain, you stop feeding it. Awareness restores power quietly, just like the drain once took it away. Chapter 4, The mask they wear. Aliens rarely appear threatening at first. In fact, many of them seem charming, intelligent, helpful, or even inspiring. This is the mask they wear. The mask is not always intentional deception. Often, it is a learned survival strategy. It allows them to blend in, gain trust, and secure emotional access without resistance. The danger of the mask is not that it exists, but that it distracts you from behavior. You focus on personality instead of patterns. You listen to words instead of observing actions. The mask makes it harder to accept what your instincts already sense. One of the most common masks aliens wear is kindness. They present themselves as supportive listeners, generous helpers, or understanding friends. They offer advice readily and appear emotionally available. This creates a sense of safety. You lower your guard. Over time, however, this kindness reveals conditions. Support is offered only when it benefits them. Listening turns into controlling the narrative. Advice becomes correction. When you do not follow their guidance, disappointment appears. The kindness was not free, it was a gateway. Another common mask is intelligence. Aliens may appear knowledgeable, articulate, or insightful. They use logic, analysis, or experience to position themselves as authorities. This mask makes you doubt your own perspective. You assume they know better. When disagreements arise, they frame your feelings as irrational or uninformed. This intellectual dominance silences emotional truth. You may stop trusting your instincts even when they are accurate. Intelligence becomes a tool, not a trait. It is used to win, not to understand. Some aliens wear the mask of innocence. They act confused when confronted. They claim they did not mean harm. They portray themselves as misunderstood or unfairly judged. This mask triggers empathy. You backtrack, soften your stance, or apologize for bringing up an issue. Innocence shifts focus away from impact and onto intention. While intention matters, it does not erase consequences. The innocence mask allows harmful behavior to continue without accountability. You end up comforting the person who hurt you. This reversal drains emotional clarity and reinforces imbalance. Another powerful mask is vulnerability. Aliens may share personal struggles early and intensely. They reveal pain, trauma, or hardship to create rapid emotional bonding. This openness feels authentic. It makes you feel trusted and needed. However, vulnerability without responsibility is manipulation. When vulnerability is used to avoid growth or excuse behavior, it becomes a mask. You hesitate to set boundaries because you do not want to hurt someone who is already hurting. This keeps you trapped in compassion without limits. Real vulnerability leads to healing. Masked vulnerability leads to dependence. Aliens also wear the mask of honesty. They pride themselves on being real or brutally honest. They justify harsh comments as truth. This mask makes disrespect socially acceptable. If you react, you are labeled sensitive. If you stay silent, the behavior continues. Honesty without empathy is not honesty, it is emotional aggression. The honesty mask allows aliens to say damaging things without taking responsibility for their impact. Over time, your self-esteem absorbs these truths and weakens. Another subtle mask is humor. Aliens may use jokes, sarcasm, or teasing to deliver criticism. When you express discomfort, they dismiss it as harmless fun. Humor becomes a shield. It allows them to test boundaries while maintaining deniability. You are left questioning whether your feelings are valid. Repeated exposure to this dynamic trains you to tolerate disrespect quietly. Laughter replaces confrontation, but the emotional effect remains. Recognizing the mask requires emotional discipline. You must separate presentation from pattern. A mask can be attractive, impressive, or comforting, but patterns reveal truth. How does this person behave when you disagree, when you succeed, when you set limits, when you need support? Masks crack under pressure. Patterns do not. Aliens rely on your attachment to the mask. They hope you will defend the image even when the behavior hurts you. This is why letting go is difficult. You are not just leaving a person, you are letting go of who you thought they were. Accepting that someone's mask does not match their impact is painful, but it is also freeing. It returns authority to your lived experience. You stop arguing with reality. You stop explaining discomfort away. You begin trusting what you feel instead of what you are told. This shift is powerful. Once you see the mask clearly, it loses control. You no longer seek validation from it. You no longer negotiate with it. You observe calmly. Aliens cannot function without their masks. Exposure removes leverage. This chapter is not about becoming suspicious or cynical. It is about becoming perceptive. Healthy people do not need masks to maintain connection. Their behavior remains consistent across situations. When words and actions align, trust grows naturally. When they do not, distance becomes wisdom. The mask is the illusion. Your awareness is the truth. Chapter 5. Emotional traps and mind games. Aliens rarely confront you directly. Direct confrontation invites resistance, and resistance weakens control. Instead, they rely on emotional traps and subtle mind games that operate below awareness. These tactics are designed to confuse you, drain you, and keep you emotionally engaged without clarity. The most effective traps do not feel like attacks. They feel like misunderstandings, concern, or normal interaction. This is why they work. By the time you recognize the pattern, you may already be questioning yourself instead of the behavior. One of the most common emotional traps is guilt shifting. Aliens reframe situations so that their actions become reactions to your behavior. If they are distant, it is because you upset them. If they are critical, it is because they care. If they cross a boundary, it is because you were unclear. This constant redirection of responsibility creates emotional confusion. You begin trying to fix problems you did not create. Guilt becomes a leash, pulling you back into engagement even when you feel wronged. Over time, you internalize responsibility for maintaining emotional balance in the relationship. Another powerful mind game is selective memory. Aliens remember events in ways that favor them. Conversations are recalled differently. Agreements become unclear. Promises were never made. When you challenge this, they appear genuinely confident in their version. This confidence makes you doubt your own memory. You may replay conversations repeatedly, trying to find proof. This mental replay is exhausting. The goal is not to convince you of their version, but to destabilize your certainty. When you doubt your memory, you rely more on theirs. Control increases quietly. Aliens also use emotional withholding as a tactic. Affection, attention, or approval is given conditionally. When you behave as expected, connection flows. When you assert independence, it disappears. This creates a reward and punishment system that shapes behavior without words. You may start modifying actions to regain warmth. This conditioning happens slowly. You do not notice the shift until your behavior no longer feels fully yours. Emotional withholding trains you to associate self-expression with loss. Another subtle trap is false urgency. Aliens create pressure around decisions, conversations, or emotional responses. They push for immediate answers, quick forgiveness, or instant understanding. This urgency bypasses reflection. You respond before processing. Once the moment passes, the emotional outcome is locked in. You may later realize you agreed to something that did not feel right. False urgency benefits aliens because clarity takes time and time reduces influence. Rushed emotions are easier to guide. Aliens also excel at triangulation. They introduce third parties into private dynamics. They compare you to others, reference opinions indirectly, or involve outsiders subtly. This creates insecurity and competition. You begin measuring yourself against unseen standards. Your focus shifts away from truth and toward approval. Triangulation fractures direct communication and keeps power diffused. You are no longer responding to one person, but to a constructed social narrative. Another mind game is emotional minimization. Aliens downplay your feelings while amplifying their own. Your concerns are small, their struggles are heavy. This imbalance conditions you to silence yourself. You begin prioritizing their emotional state over yours. Over time, you may stop sharing honestly, believing your feelings are inconvenient or excessive. Emotional minimization erodes self-trust. When feelings are repeatedly dismissed, you learn to dismiss them yourself. Aliens also use over-explaining as a trap. They talk in circles, provide excessive detail, and shift focus repeatedly. The conversation becomes exhausting. You lose track of the original issue. Eventually, you drop it just to regain peace. This tactic is not about clarity, it is about fatigue. Mental exhaustion lowers resistance. When you are tired, you agree. When you are drained, you disengage. Either outcome benefits them. Another subtle game is the reversal of roles. When confronted, aliens may become emotional, defensive, or wounded. The conversation shifts from addressing behavior to comforting them. You end up reassuring the person who caused harm. This reversal trains you to avoid future confrontation. You associate speaking up with emotional chaos. Silence becomes safer. Over time, the alien's behavior remains unchecked while your voice grows quieter. Recognizing emotional traps requires slowing down. Mind games thrive on speed, confusion, and emotional reactivity. Awareness introduces pause. When you pause, you regain choice. You do not need to respond immediately. You do not need to explain endlessly. You do not need to fix emotions that are not yours. This chapter is not about labeling every difficult interaction as manipulation. It is about noticing patterns that consistently leave you confused, guilty, or drained. Healthy relationships may involve discomfort, but they do not rely on confusion to function. Clarity strengthens connection. Mind games weaken it. The moment you recognize a trap, its power decreases. You stop stepping into it unconsciously. You observe instead of react. Aliens lose influence when emotional clarity replaces emotional chaos. Understanding these traps is not about becoming defensive. It is about becoming grounded. When you are grounded, mind games have nowhere to land. Chapter 6. The power of emotional distance. Emotional distance is often misunderstood. Many people confuse it with coldness, avoidance, or lack of care. In reality, emotional distance is a skill. It is the ability to remain internally stable regardless of someone else's behavior. For dealing with aliens, emotional distance is not just helpful, it is essential. Aliens feed on emotional reactions. When you react, explain, defend, or overinvest, they gain influence. Emotional distance quietly removes their fuel. It allows you to stay present without being pulled into unnecessary emotional labor. One of the first steps toward emotional distance is recognizing that not every emotion you feel belongs to you. Aliens often project their internal chaos outward. They bring tension, dissatisfaction, or insecurity into the interaction. If you absorb it, you carry weight that was never yours. Emotional distance creates separation between observation and identification. You notice what is happening without merging with it. This separation protects clarity. You remain grounded while the situation remains external. Aliens lose power when their emotions stop becoming your responsibility. Another aspect of emotional distance is reducing emotional explanations. Many people believe that being understood requires detailed emotional disclosure. With healthy people, this can deepen connection. With aliens, it increases vulnerability. The more you explain how you feel, the more information they gain to manipulate or dismiss. Emotional distance does not mean suppressing feelings. It means choosing where and with whom you express them. You stop offering your inner world to people who misuse it. Silence becomes strategic, not passive. Emotional distance also involves releasing the need to be validated. Aliens often withhold validation intentionally or unconsciously. If your self-worth depends on their approval, you remain emotionally attached. Distance begins when your sense of value becomes internal. You no longer need agreement to feel secure. Disapproval loses its sting. This shift is powerful. When aliens sense that their reactions no longer affect you deeply, their behavior changes. Some escalate, others withdraw. Both outcomes restore your autonomy. Another key element of emotional distance is slowing down your responses. Immediate reactions are emotional. Delayed responses are intentional. When you pause, you regain control over tone, words, and direction. You are no longer reacting from discomfort. You are choosing from clarity. This pause disrupts mind games. Urgency dissolves. Pressure loses force. Emotional distance thrives in calm timing. Aliens rely on speed. Distance relies on patience. Emotional distance also requires adjusting expectations. Many people suffer because they expect emotional maturity from those who do not possess it. When you expect depth from shallow containers, disappointment is inevitable. Distance allows you to see people as they are, not as you hope they will be. This acceptance is not approval. It is realism. Once expectations align with reality, emotional friction decreases. You stop demanding what cannot be given. Peace increases naturally. Another form of emotional distance is limiting exposure. You do not need constant interaction to maintain connection. Reducing frequency, duration, or intensity of engagement preserves energy. This is not punishment, it is regulation. Emotional distance creates space for recovery. In that space, your nervous system relaxes, clarity returns. You remember who you are outside the dynamic. Aliens lose influence when access becomes limited. Distance changes the power balance quietly. Emotional distance also strengthens boundaries. Boundaries without emotional distance collapse under pressure. When you feel guilty, anxious, or responsible for others' reactions, boundaries weaken. Distance allows you to hold limits without emotional negotiation. You state your position once. You do not defend it repeatedly. You do not argue feelings. You let reality speak. Consistency replaces intensity. Chapter 7. Aliens test boundaries that aliens respect. Boundaries distance are makes not those walls. Tests ineffective. They are lines of another clarity important that define where you internal end and where others begin. Emotional healthy people recognize monitoring how you speak to yourself. Aliens test aliens them. Often this leave is why boundaries are essential when dealing with difficult individuals. Without boundaries, distance means questioning those self-sacrifice. You ask whether the thought is yours or absorbed. Aliens may ignore spoken mental ownership, but they understand carrying external narratives internally. Emotional boundaries do not require emotional intensity. It is engagement with discernment. They require clarity and without being consumable. The most respected open without being often the quiet ones. You remain calm. One of the biggest mistakes people make is explaining boundaries excessively. Aliens thrive on explanations. Emotionally, they turn explanations into debates, guilt, when you respond neutrally, when you do not overreact does not need justification. When your mood remains definition. Their tactics when you say no, it does not require a story. confrontation.
When you set a limit, it does not require
emotional disclosure. Emotional distance is built
The more
through
you
practice,
explain,
not
the more
force.
openings
You will
you
not
create.
master it overnight.
Clear,
There
simple
will be moments
statements
of
are harder
emotional
to
manipulate.
pull.
That is normal.
Consistency
The goal is
strengthens
not
them over
perfection,
time.
but awareness.
Aliens respect
Each
what does
time
not
you
move.
choose calm over
Boundaries
reaction,
also
you strengthen
require
the skill.
emotional neutrality.
Over time,
If
emotional
your boundary is
distance
delivered
becomes
with
natural.
anger, guilt, or defensiveness,
It becomes
aliens
your
focus
default.
on the emotion
This
rather than the
chapter
limit.
is about
They may
reclaiming your
provoke
emotional
reactions
space.
intentionally to
When you
weaken
stop lending your emotions
neutral
to those
boundaries
who
remove
misuse
this
them,
leverage.
you regain
Calm
power.
tone signals
Distance
certainty.
does not disconnect
Certainty
you from
reduces
others.
challenge.
It reconnects you to yourself. Emotional neutrality does not mean indifference. It means control. When you are calm, you communicate that the boundary is not negotiable. Aliens understand firmness without noise. Another essential element of boundaries is consequence. A boundary without consequence is a suggestion. Aliens test limits to see what happens when they cross them. If nothing changes, the behavior continues. Consequences do not need to be dramatic. They can be subtle shifts in access, time, or attention. Reduced availability is a powerful signal. When behavior leads to less access, aliens adjust. Access is currency. Boundaries regulate currency flow. Boundaries also work best when they are behavioral, not emotional. Instead of saying how something makes you feel repeatedly, state what you will do. You control your actions, not others' reactions. For example, instead of expressing frustration endlessly, you may state that you will disengage from certain conversations. This shifts power inward. Aliens cannot argue with what you choose to do. They can only respond to it. Behavioral boundaries create clarity without emotional entanglement. Another key aspect is recognizing which boundaries need to be set internally. Not all boundaries are spoken. Some are decisions you make about what you will tolerate, engage with, or invest in. Internal boundaries protect energy before interaction begins. You choose not to engage in certain topics. You choose not to respond immediately. You choose not to take responsibility for others' moods. These internal boundaries are invisible but effective. Aliens sense reduced emotional availability and lose leverage. Boundaries often trigger resistance at first. This resistance is not proof that you are wrong. It is proof that the boundary matters. Aliens may push harder, guilt you, or act confused. This phase tests your consistency. If you retreat, the boundary weakens. If you remain steady, the behavior adjusts. Boundaries teach people how to treat you. They reveal who respects you and who benefits from your lack of limits. Another important truth is that boundaries do not require agreement. Aliens may not like your boundaries. They do not need to. Boundaries are not requests for permission. They are statements of self-respect. When you stop seeking approval for protecting yourself, boundaries become easier to maintain. Approval seeking weakens limits. Self-trust strengthens them. Boundaries also help you see relationships clearly. When limits are in place, patterns emerge. Some people adapt and respect you more, others distance themselves. This information is valuable. It shows who can grow with you and who relied on your overgiving. Boundaries simplify life by filtering connections naturally. You do not need to confront everyone. Boundaries do the work quietly. Maintaining boundaries requires patience. There may be moments of discomfort or doubt. You may feel selfish or harsh initially. This feeling fades as balance returns. Boundaries create emotional breathing room. In that space, clarity replaces guilt. Energy stabilizes, respect grows. This chapter is not about becoming rigid or cold. It is about becoming clear. Clear people are harder to manipulate. Clear people attract healthier dynamics. Aliens respect boundaries not because they understand them emotionally, but because they understand structure. Structure limits influence. When your life has structure, aliens lose access. Boundaries are not a defense, they are a foundation. Chapter 8. When silence becomes your weapon, silence is often misunderstood as weakness. In reality, silence is one of the most powerful tools you have when dealing with aliens. Words give access. Reactions provide fuel. Explanations create openings. Silence closes doors quietly. It does not argue, defend, or chase understanding. It simply withdraws energy. Aliens rely on engagement to maintain influence. When engagement stops, control weakens. Silence is not avoidance. It is intentional non-participation in emotional games. One of the most important things to understand about silence is that it removes leverage. Aliens provoke to extract reactions. They ask leading questions, make subtle remarks, or create emotional tension to pull you into response. When you respond emotionally, the dynamic continues. When you remain silent, the cycle breaks. Silence denies feedback. Without feedback, manipulation loses direction. Aliens become uncertain. Uncertainty reduces power. Silence also protects you from overexposure. Many people reveal too much when they feel pressured to explain themselves. Aliens collect information. They remember emotional details, insecurities, and triggers. Silence limits this data flow. You stop feeding the system. The less information you provide, the less material they have to use. This creates emotional safety without confrontation. Silence preserves privacy and control. Another strength of silence is that it prevents escalation. Arguments require two participants. Mind games require engagement. Silence refuses the invitation. You do not need to win every discussion. You need to protect peace. Silence allows emotions to settle instead of intensify. It gives time for clarity. Aliens often rely on urgency and emotional intensity. Silence introduces pause. Pause restores balance. Silence also communicates boundaries without words. When you stop responding to certain behaviors, you signal limits clearly. You are no longer available for disrespect, manipulation, or emotional chaos. This non-response is not passive, it is decisive. Aliens test silence at first. They may provoke more, accuse you of being distant, or demand explanation. This is a test of consistency. If silence holds, behavior changes. If it breaks, the pattern resumes. Consistent silence is more effective than emotional confrontation. Another benefit of silence is self-regulation. It gives you time to process emotions internally instead of externally. Instead of reacting from hurt or anger, you observe. This observation builds emotional intelligence. You learn what triggers you and why. Silence becomes a mirror. It reflects the dynamic without distortion. In this space, you regain control over your internal state. Aliens lose access to your emotional center. Silence also shifts power dynamics. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop asking to be understood by those who refuse to listen. This shift is subtle but profound. Aliens sense it. They realize that emotional influence is no longer guaranteed. Some may disengage, others may attempt new tactics. Either way, silence changes the game. It puts you back in control without aggression. It is important to distinguish silence from suppression. Suppression hides emotion and creates internal pressure. Silence acknowledges emotion without expressing it in unsafe spaces. You still process feelings, but privately or with trusted people. Silence is selective expression, not emotional denial. This distinction protects mental health. Silence also strengthens self-respect. When you stop responding to manipulation, you send a message to yourself. You affirm that your peace matters. Over time, this builds confidence. You become less reactive, more grounded. External behavior has less influence over your internal state. Aliens struggle with people who are internally stable. Silence contributes to that stability. Another powerful aspect of silence is that it allows truth to reveal itself. Without your reactions to distract from behavior, patterns become clear. Aliens often expose themselves when they do not receive expected responses. Their frustration, escalation, or withdrawal reveals motive. You do not need to confront to see truth. Silence allows it to surface naturally. This information guides future decisions. Silence is not permanent withdrawal. It is a strategic pause. You choose when to speak and when not to. You engage intentionally, not reflexively. This control restores autonomy. You are no longer pulled into emotional cycles, you step out. This chapter is not encouraging emotional isolation. It is encouraging emotional discipline. Words are valuable. They should be used where they are respected. Silence protects words from misuse. When silence becomes your weapon, you do not need to fight. You simply stop feeding what drains you. In that absence, clarity grows, power returns, peace settles. Chapter 9, Cutting Ties Without Guilt Letting Go is often harder than enduring harm. Many people stay connected to aliens not because the relationship feels good, but because leaving feels wrong. Guilt becomes the chain. You worry about being seen as cruel, ungrateful, or disloyal. You fear judgment, conflict, or regret. Aliens benefit from this internal struggle. Guilt keeps access open long after respect has disappeared. Cutting ties without guilt begins with understanding that self-protection is not cruelty. It is responsibility. You are not required to sacrifice your well-being to preserve someone else's comfort. One of the biggest sources of guilt is the belief that history equals obligation. Time invested feels like a contract. Memories feel like debt. Aliens rely on this belief. They remind you of the past to justify the present, but history does not guarantee a future. People change, dynamics evolve, staying in harmful connections because of what once was keeps you trapped in what no longer serves you. Growth sometimes requires release. Letting go does not erase the past, it honors the present. Another source of guilt is empathy. You understand their struggles, you see their wounds. You recognize their pain. This awareness makes leaving feel heartless, but empathy without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. You can care without staying. You can understand without enduring. Compassion does not require access. Distance can coexist with kindness. Cutting ties does not mean you stop wishing them well. It means you stop carrying what is not yours. Guilt also arises from fear of being misunderstood. Aliens often control narratives. You worry they will portray you negatively. You imagine explanations you will never be asked to give. This imagined judgment keeps you stuck. The truth is that people committed to misunderstanding you will do so regardless of explanation. You do not owe clarity to those who misuse it. Your peace is not a public debate. Letting go quietly is often the most dignified choice. Another powerful realization is that closure does not require conversation. Many people wait for apologies, acknowledgement, or mutual understanding before leaving. Aliens rarely provide this. Waiting for closure keeps you emotionally tied. Closure is an internal decision, not an external event. You give it to yourself by accepting reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. This acceptance releases guilt. You stop seeking permission to move on. Cutting ties can be gradual. It does not always require dramatic endings or confrontations. Reduced contact, limited engagement, and emotional withdrawal are valid forms of release. Guilt often decreases when change is gentle and consistent. You do not need to announce your departure. You simply choose yourself more often. Over time, the connection fades naturally. This approach protects energy and minimizes conflict. It also allows you to adjust emotionally. Guilt loses strength when replaced by clarity. Another important aspect is reframing responsibility. You are responsible for your actions, not for others' reactions. If someone feels hurt by your boundaries or distance, that emotion belongs to them. You can acknowledge it without absorbing it. Carrying others' emotional responses is optional. Letting go of this burden frees you from guilt. You stop managing emotions that are not yours to manage. This shift is essential for emotional maturity. Cutting ties also reveals self-worth. When you choose peace over chaos, you affirm that your life has value. This affirmation may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you are used to prioritizing others. Discomfort does not mean wrong, it means unfamiliar. Over time, self-respect replaces guilt. You feel lighter, you breathe deeper, you regain mental space. These are signs of alignment, not selfishness. It is also important to release the fantasy that you could have saved the relationship by trying harder. This belief fuels guilt endlessly. Relationships fail not because one person did not give enough, but because balance was missing. You cannot compensate for another person's lack of accountability. Accepting this truth ends self-blame. You did what you could with what you knew. Growth requires grace toward yourself. This chapter is about permission. Permission to choose peace. Permission to walk away without explanation. Permission to prioritize your mental health. Cutting ties without guilt is an act of strength, not weakness. It reflects clarity, not cruelty. When you release what drains you, you create space for what nourishes you. Letting go is not loss, it is alignment. Chapter 10. Becoming unreachable. Becoming unreachable does not mean isolating yourself from the world. It means reaching a state where harmful people no longer have emotional access to you. Unreachability is not about physical distance alone. It is about internal stability. Aliens lose power when they can no longer influence your thoughts, emotions, or behavior. This final shift is not sudden. It is built through awareness, boundaries, silence, and self-trust practiced consistently over time. When these elements come together, something changes quietly. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You stop adjusting yourself to fit uncomfortable spaces. You become unavailable for manipulation. One of the clearest signs of becoming unreachable is emotional predictability. Your mood no longer rises and falls based on someone else's behavior. You remain steady whether you receive approval or criticism. This steadiness confuses aliens. They rely on emotional spikes to maintain relevance. When reactions disappear, influence fades. Emotional predictability is not numbness. It is regulation. You feel fully, but you do not broadcast vulnerability where it can be misused. This internal control is strength. Another sign is reduced urgency. You no longer feel pressure to respond immediately, fix problems quickly, or resolve every tension. Time becomes your ally. Delayed responses create space for reflection. Reflection leads to clarity. Clarity leads to better choices. Aliens struggle with people who are not rushed. Urgency fuels manipulation. Calm timing dissolves it. When you move at your own pace, you regain authority over your life. Becoming unreachable also means your self-worth becomes self-generated. You no longer seek reassurance from unstable sources. Validation from others becomes optional, not necessary. This independence shifts how you relate to everyone. Praise feels pleasant but not addictive. Criticism feels informative but not crushing. Aliens lose leverage when approval no longer controls you. This internal validation system is built through self-honesty and consistent self-respect. Another important aspect is selective openness. You stop sharing personal details with those who have proven untrustworthy. Privacy becomes intentional. Not everything needs to be explained or expressed. You choose depth with those who demonstrate safety. This selectivity protects emotional resources. Aliens cannot manipulate what they do not know. Reduced access leads to reduced influence. Over time, your inner world feels calmer and more secure. Becoming unreachable also changes how you handle conflict. You no longer engage in circular conversations or emotional debates. You address issues once clearly or not at all. You do not chase understanding from those who refuse to listen. This restraint saves energy. It also reinforces boundaries naturally. Aliens sense finality in this behavior. They realize that emotional games no longer work. Some will drift away, others will adjust. Either outcome benefits you. Unreachability also involves redefining connection. You prioritize relationships that feel reciprocal, respectful, and energizing. You invest where effort flows both ways. This intentional connection fills the space left by unhealthy ties. You realize that peace is not boring, it is nourishing. Drama loses appeal, stability becomes attractive. Your standards rise without effort. Another key element is self-trust. You trust your perceptions, instincts, and emotional responses. You no longer need external confirmation to validate discomfort. When something feels wrong, you listen. This trust prevents future entanglement with aliens. You recognize early signs and adjust accordingly. Experience becomes wisdom instead of regret. Becoming unreachable is not about proving anything. It is not revenge or superiority. It is neutrality. You stop positioning yourself against others and start aligning with yourself. This alignment creates quiet confidence. You move through life with less resistance. External chaos has less impact. Internal clarity guides decisions. This state is deeply freeing. Finally, becoming unreachable means accepting that not everyone will understand your growth. Some people will label your distance as coldness. Others will misinterpret your boundaries. That is okay. You are no longer available for misinterpretation management. Your responsibility ends with integrity, not approval. This acceptance completes the journey. You have learned to recognize aliens, understand their patterns, protect your energy, and choose yourself without guilt. You are no longer reachable in the ways that once drained you. In this you reachability, you find peace, strength, and freedom.